Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, Aspire leaders and Teach Better family, I am back with a familiar guest, someone who was on the podcast many, many times with a collaboration project that we've done. Wow, Sarah, actually, it was a year probably? Aspire to Rise. We had some coaching calls that we had with various people that were looking to enhance their leadership journey. And I will say that there were a lot of success stories with those who joined us for that program.
Yeah, actually, I think it's been longer than that, which is a surprise. But if you're like me, which I know you are, we're at the same age where all of a sudden things just start to go by so fast, you don't even know.
Yes.
But yeah, I think actually a lot of the people that we had on the show are in titled roles now, which has been really fun to watch them.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. So who knows, maybe in the future, Sarah and I will jump back on and do some more coaching calls. So if you are listening and you are interested, of course, you can reach out to either one of us. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's very simple because our handles are on the screen for you. But I will say, Sarah, it is always a pleasure and honor to speak with you. And I'm so happy to have you join me once again on Aspire to Lead. And with that, I would love for you just to update the listeners on what's going on in your world.
Well, I actually am in the middle, actually coming off of a nice little break for once in my life. That seems odd to say that, but I don't remember the last time I was on, but the last time I think we spoke, I might have just been coming out of the library, possibly. Spent the last academic year working through J. Casas and Associates, coaching clients and working with my adjunct professorship, but then also striving to get my dissertation done. And I'm closer and closer to that, which is really exciting. And the last 2 weeks, I have been in the step where I am waiting for the IRB approval, which is where you've submitted your proposal to do the research and you wait for a group of people smarter than you, apparently, to tell you if you can do your research or not. So that's where I'm at. We're just midsummer and yeah, loving life.
Love and life. I love it. So we'll touch on the doctoral program because I've never been through that experience. I'd love to get your perspective. And I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of folks that are listening right now that have either thought about it or maybe they're starting to get into the program and want to know more information. So we'll dive into that topic more so. But Sarah, I have the pleasure of joining you on Monday with a college that you're associated with. And I think you've been for quite some time because I feel like I've been on there with your students 2 or 3 times prior. So do you want to share your involvement with that organization also?
Yes. If you're a listener to the Aspire podcast and you've connected with Joshua and I over the years, you know that I have been out of formal principal role for, I think I just finished the 6th academic year. And one of the things that I took on after I left that position was an adjunct professor role for educational leadership in the state of Wisconsin through Viterbo University. And so got myself trained to do that content and deliver it with a hybrid model. And so for the past 5 years, I've had the privilege and honor of coming alongside educators on their journey to become principals, curriculum directors, directors of special education, all sorts of titled roles here in the state. And I have taught the introductory courses for that program for the past 5 years, taking on actually so many classes when others had to step away during COVID that I found myself with no weekend time a couple of falls. But I teach the leadership assessment course as well as the Principal 1 course and a legal class, the legal aspects of education. And that has been just a really amazing way to keep myself engaged in the concepts, the essential concepts of leadership. We use the professional standards for educational leaders, which are the national standards, to build our curriculum. And it's just been such a joy. And I think that it's a really relevant place for us to go to talk about that when we think about becoming, the Aspire leading and becoming titled. It's always fun to know when people come to the program, whether they want to be principals or not. And we talk through that. I wish I would have been taking some quantitative measures to know over time how many people tell me they don't want to be a principal. But then by the time they're done with Principal 1, a lot of them actually tell me that they're opening up their world to that, which I think is fantastic because we need really great people doing that really challenging work. So yes, grateful to be able to do that. And you have actually been so impactful that when you come in and speak, people are very regularly quoting you in their final assessments. And it's always really fun to see my friends, work kind of documented in the professional reflection of these really incredible leaders who are set to do really wonderful things here in our state.
Well, it's always a joy to be with such a young group of leaders. And yeah, kudos to you for making an imprint on them and their leadership, because obviously you're impacting not only those folks, but those who they're serving. So love that you've been associated with them for so long. And let's talk about the introductory course and some of the thoughts that are presented there, because I feel like in the summertime, a lot of people are kind of on the fence, educators that are like, I'm curious about leadership. Maybe someone has tapped them on the shoulder and given them a piece of advice, or maybe encourage them to move forward in that direction. And if they're looking to get into a program, what are some of the things that you cover as far as that introductory into leadership and maybe into the principal chair? Because I would like to give them kind of a glimpse of what they may see at the collegiate level.
Yeah, right. That's the beautiful part. I always say this, that one of the things that I love being in this program is that I have been a consumer of programs too. I did not get my degree from this institution. So I know that, everybody handles it just a little bit differently. I deeply appreciate the approach that we have at Viterbo right now, which is it's like still a cohort model, but it's like a hybrid. So when students take classes from me, I still do them online. I held pretty tight to that after COVID because it didn't make sense to me to drive hours and hours away from my family to deliver these courses when we could do it like we're doing right now, on YouTube and via Zoom, and still meet synchronously and build connections and all of that jazz. So having said that, I know that every program is different, but here in the university that I work with, we have what's called a leadership assessment course. So the cool part is it's the introductory course. It's before you even start to get into some of those licensed content areas. And in that, we use the professional standards for educational leaders, and we have like 6 essential questions for every class. And in this one particular, one of the things that I love about it is that we really help leaders to develop and actually what we call at J. Casas and Associates, their leadership language. We go through the importance of having your own personal mission, vision, and values so that you know if yours aligns with the organization. Because we know that leaders are supposed to lead that work of developing mission, vision, and values, but it's really interesting to know that in order to lead that work at an institutional level, if you haven't done it at your own personal level, it kind of makes it really hard, So we do those. We work on decision making. We do actual modules so that leaders who have not been tested in that sense of learning how to truly build strategic change in their organization. It takes a lot of mindfulness on how you make a decision, how you communicate a decision, how you communicate how you're making the decision, all of that. So that's really important. We also talk a lot in that class about leading good change for the equity for all students. And so making sure specifically in that class, we touch upon the elements of poverty in our communities specifically. So we actually use a text that just helps us learn about turning high poverty schools into high performing schools. And in that way, we talk about the elements of quality schools. And so, what does it take to create programming that is inclusive for all students, and just a lot of really dynamic discussions that take place in that space. So a lot there. One of the things that I think is crucial for listeners to hear and for the work that we do is focusing on helping the leaders become very self-reflective. And a huge piece of that is providing one resource, which is we end up doing the Clifton Strengths Assessment so that they can learn about their strengths and reflect upon that in those 4 core areas. One of the things I also love about it is we talk about the fact that to be a leader, you need to be able to have followers, and what do followers need? And we talk about building compassion, trust. There are 4 elements to that in terms of what followers need. So hope is another. And now I can't remember the 4th as I'm just pulling it out of my brain, but just kind of important to realize that it's not just about what you bring to the table, but what the followers in your organization are also going to need, and how do you build that through your strengths lens. But then, of course, and I'm talking a lot, a huge piece of this is we start to realize that, okay, wait, we're not supposed to be everything for everybody. And so how do we make sure that if we don't have a strength, for example, in the executing lane, how do we round that out? because we need to achieve and we need to execute our plans. But if our strengths lie in, relationship building, ding, 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 that's Sarah Johnson, how do we get the follow through? So yeah, that's kind of a very big overview.
All right. For the listeners, Sarah says, I'm talking too much. She's a podcaster herself. So when the mic is flipped, it feels like we are talking more than we're supposed to. And that's not the case. Sarah's the guest. And so I love tapping into her wisdom. So speak away, please, Sarah. You had touched on working with Jimmy Casas. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of his and have the honor and privilege of writing for his company, his publishing company, Connected Ed, with the wonderful Charlie Peck. And I want to just touch on what you provide with Jimmy Casas, because it's wonderful for those who are in a collegiate program and getting all of those wonderful insights into what leadership is. But I'm curious, you're starting to talk about all these pieces that I know for myself, as I was in the role of administration, it was really hard to focus on them sometimes, or maybe I was like, oh, it's not important. I have a bigger fire over here, maybe even like reflection and maybe some of the items with coaching and stuff. So will you just talk through what you do with Jimmy in regards to supporting our current leaders?
Yeah, so I actually love how I'm talking about two different organizations that I serve, but they just always interweave, and it really makes me so grateful to be serving in those capacities, because what I do for Jimmy's organization in terms of the leadership coaching is come alongside current practitioners, clients. A lot of time, and actually I would say all times, we are hired because the leaders in the organization who are in charge of the finances see that school principals, district leaders, directors also need people to be able to reflect and bounce ideas off of. They need thought partners. They need non-evaluative people to help them think through all angles. They deeply value and appreciate the fact that culture can be hard to see when you're in it. One of the things that I really have observed over time is that, and I know I experienced this, and I believe you probably did too, Joshua, that when you're in it, it's so hard to see an unemotional lens of how events are carrying out in your organization. First, because it does feel very personal, but as leaders, we need to learn that a lot of times adult behavior inside and outside of the school really is not supposed to be taken personally. It's supposed to be analyzed and understood and worked through, just like we want to with our students in our classrooms. But it just becomes so challenging to do so because leaders get often caught up in what feels very personal. And I know that I felt the same way. And I'll, to give you a quick example, surveys that are anonymous that have comments. I saw Joshua just smile. I have very strong feelings about those.
So do I. I.
Yeah. I mean, so just helping clients process through some of that. One of the things that I would say, what we strive to do is our main goals are to help principals or school leaders, or district leaders, whatever, really cultivate the culture and lead the learning. Those, we believe, are the two primary purposes. And a lot of times what happens is clients will, they really customize the service that they need. Sometimes they'll have me in on culture interviews. Sometimes we do those for them. Sometimes we go through their, professional goal plans or their building plans. A lot of times we're a part of their admin team meetings so we can provide feedback in terms of, what they might not be seeing in terms of how they create what we call undercurrents. And what that is it's just leaders who think, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, or listeners, where you feel like you're communicating crystal clear, but the people around you did not receive it that way. And suddenly you thought this beautiful plan that should be working out with no kinks and solving problems was actually maybe diminishing the leadership capacity of your APs, for example, or something along those lines. So we just are so grateful to come alongside current practitioners and help them process through all the things in an extremely safe and supportive way. I get to say the things that other people can't say, and I get to listen a lot. And I think that leaders don't often get listened to. They have to do a lot of listening.
Yeah, I want to talk about the benefit of that, Sarah, because you just touched on it a little bit, but I'd love for you to go even further, because I think that's true. I think, you being an outside entity coming in and observing and assessing what's going on at the campus level, but then also being able to speak probably more freely than maybe someone within the organization. Mm-hmm. And I think it does the message comes different from you than potentially someone else that's either someone that they're working with every single day, or someone that's maybe a boss that's coming in at the district level. So can you just speak on that relationship and maybe some of the benefits that come along with potentially you and Jimmy and crew coming in to help not only assess, but then also giving, words of encouragement or advice or, just some feedback?
Yeah, and I will say that the way I approach the coach role specifically is more so that supportive. I try hard not to go into consulting or advising. It's more so just helping them come to the answer that they already have in them, but helping them reflect by asking more and more questions.
Yeah.
So what that ends up becoming, though, is more of we joke about this. It's not funny. My clients often will say, I feel like you're my therapist. And I say, okay, but I'm not qualified to be that therapist. Let me just remind you. But again, I think it just goes back to that piece of not having people that in our schools that we can genuinely have an open, trusting conversation with without fear of feeling like you are being seen as less effective or actually being evaluated as less effective because maybe you make an observation about your skills that you need to grow or something along those lines. So, our job really is to just help those clients become their most excellent. And that can just be so individualized. For example, we have a client. Well, we have massive clients and a lot of us will have, multiple principals in that school, for example. And one of the things that I love is I could have 4 principals that all have different needs in that same organization, as well as my teammates may have, up to the same amount, and they all have different. And then there are some that have common needs. And a lot of times at JCASS and Associates, we'll come together as coaches and say, hey, have you noticed this kind of structural issue for this organization? And then we're able to individually have those conversations to help those clients through it. But then we kind of team up and we create, if there's a universal issue, I'll give you a quick example. We make all sorts of assumptions that principals have administrative assistants. And in fact, in some organizations, they don't. And we know that in order to manage and lead effectively, principals need teams and they need office teams. They need to be able to have a structure that is culturally developed in those offices because those people are the front faces of, the organization. But sometimes they don't even have that role identified. They're titled differently, they're whatever. So we have found that in supporting our clients, we always say we want them to meet X amount of times with their APs, with their office staff. And then when they don't have office staff or their classified staff or non-certified staff, however we want to word that, I can't think with my dog kind of going nuts behind me. Sorry. When they have, different hours or things like that create barriers to make that comfortable, we can just sit there and process through and work through that together as a team and help that organization even make some changes about how they classify their staff to better support the structure in the school. We've done that. I've offered, for example, workshops. I will do direct workshops for the office staff to help when the principal can't seem to get the space or time to leverage some of that. There's just a lot of different angles that we've taken in order to help, and it's all very individualized. It's pretty much what they need. Sorry.
You don't need to apologize. I've had so many furry friends jump into. Actually, I had an interview where the cat actually jumped on the screen, the laptop of my guest, and the whole thing fell down, and they had to reset their computer and jump back on. So
you're saying that in comparative suffering here, it's not that bad.
I've had so many things over the last 6 years happen with dogs, cats, children, sometimes my own. So I have a full menagerie here in my house between the 6 kids and the dogs. So I totally understand.
They're welcomed distractions, I guess.
Welcome distractions.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
I wanted to talk about your dissertation. So we had talked about a little bit, just touched on the doctoral program. So I don't know which direction you want to go. I know you're in the thick of it right now as you're waiting for approval from the brain trust there at the university to move forward in the next step. But just curious on, what you can share to help those who are listening right now that are maybe on the fence or maybe even thinking about, is it even worth it? What's the benefit? Why should I get my doctorate in the first place? And if they do feel called to that, what might they expect?
Yeah, if you don't mind a little story.
Please.
Back before COVID hit, I had started my own coaching business, and I was doing that through Firm Foundations coaching. And that was through the content that I had built with my Lead with Faith book. And what a gift. It was such a joy. I ended up learning that I just didn't have the capacity to do it all. So that one stepped away. I think I'm going to go back to that, and maybe in this next year. But what I wanted to say is, one of my clients was like, I just feel like I need to get a PhD. Everyone else is getting one. They seem to be, an important piece of, yay, he's got a copy of Lead with Faith up there. Gosh, I love that cover. Anyway, they're talking about this need to kind of, it seemed like keep up with everybody to start a program. And at the time, I had already, when I was in my principal role, started my ed specialist degree. And I did that because it was like, well, they're going to pay for some continuing credits in my admin contract. I hadn't been using it. I might as well do it. So I did just kind of start slowly pittering along. And when I left my principal job, one of my mentors really encouraged me. He's like, I think you should get your superintendent license. And so I did start back with that program. And anyway, back to that client, I was like, you don't need it. They're only letters. It's like taking out a second mortgage for something that's not going to have what we call ROI, right? There's not return on investment for the amount of money that you put into a PhD or an EDD to get it back in any particular role in an organization. I mean, I found that to be true. That's not just Sarah Johnson spouting negativity or whatever.
No, I've heard that too.
Yeah. So that's me in one breath. And then it wasn't a few months later when, if listeners ever pay attention to the work that I do, I have a very involved spiritual practice where I journal and I listen for direction. And that's why I left my principal job. And it's why, even after telling my client that really, up to you, but that's a lot of money, et cetera, I shifted gears, and I just, because of a spiritual direction, I can't even remember the year anymore, what it would have been, 2021-ish or something like that. I was very directly told that I needed to switch to a doctoral program. And I still shudder thinking about it because our finances were not in a place where we could afford that, having been in an entrepreneurial role when the world kind of shut down and all of this. But I demonstrated trust again and what we would call obedient faith. And I actually talked to you about organizations to look at, and I very carefully and meticulously chose the organization that I enrolled in. And so anyway, suffice it to say, here's what's interesting. So I started the PhD program, and yes, I found out that it was far too much money. My first year, I felt resistant the whole time, thinking, what am I doing? I have written, my own book on leadership. I teach courses at the leadership level, all these things. And content-wise, it didn't feel like it was fulfilling me very much. And I felt like I was spending a lot of money. So I'm just telling you all that right now. Warning, I've heard that the master's program, you end up getting more content than necessarily in the PhD. But I did keep putting through it. I learned actually a lot. The program that I enrolled in, it was at Cardinal University for what was called Leadership, Learning, and Service. And doesn't that just sound amazing? First year was all about leadership. Second year was about learning. So you're going back to neuroscience and the elements of actually learning with the brain in mind. And so it was like a revisit for all of this really critical knowledge that I had, but hadn't maybe poured myself into for a while. So the second year I started thinking, well, I think I can get behind this. It's still a lot of money. I'm having to meet every week with these 5 other people that I think now are great. And so I remember coming around to the end of the content study year where I was like, yeah, I think this is a good thing. And I can't wait. I can actually do this work. And then my organization closed. They gave us 6 weeks notice. And the reason I wanted to share this news is because in truth, I resisted this journey first. It took me a full year to feel that there actually was value. In the second year, I was finding such great value and camaraderie, and I was growing and learning and shaping my own lens. And then just when I got comfortable, something very unique happened. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because my focus on my study is resiliency. And I realized almost suddenly in it, when that was happening to me, is that this is happening for me. And I'm having to learn resilience, and I'm having to make very intentional choices now. So anyway, long story short, I was able to transfer into another university, which the Teach Better team, I want to mention this because, we love Ohio educators, and I ended up reaching out to Ohio people to see if the organization that was offering transfers was a reputable source. And I found out that Tiffin University in Ohio is. And so I ended up transferring my PhD now is going to be in global leadership. And I was able to learn a lot more about global leadership in the course of the year that I had for that content. So it went away from service, and I spent my third year of learning in, I suppose, my second technical year in learning on global leadership, global politics. It was just so fascinating. So anyway, here's what I want to say is any PhD or EDD program, you're going to be back into content. And I'm going to tell you right now that whatever you want to take out of it is what you will take out of it, because at this point it's a terminal degree. If you've already learned through, your master's program, you have become a content master, it will push you. And it is hard. There were weeks I was having to produce a 20-page paper while also, working exorbitant amount of time and not having any weekends and all that stuff. But I'm grateful for it. And it has grown my stamina and my endurance and my energy for contributing to the field. So the way it works is you do, usually the programs are 60 credits. And then every university or institution handles it differently. But a lot of times, if you're going to look for a program, I highly recommend finding one that does the dissertation along the way, because by the time I transferred to Tiffin, I had already selected my topic. I had already selected the study design that I wanted. And so by the time I transitioned over, I, in theory, should have been able to finish it in this last year. It'd be 3 years done. I will be done at hopefully the end of September, October. But there's a whole process in a dissertation. I just want to tell you this because it's funny. A lot of people lately have said, I did not realize what you were working on, Sarah. I had no idea that you were conducting your own study. Try to help them realize that that's really what a dissertation is. And the world is riddled with what we call ABD. And before I was in a program, I didn't know what that was, but it's called all but dissertation. And I'm there. I've been there since last October. It means that I took all of the course requirements. I spent all of that money on 50 some credits or something like that to learn. And the only thing I have left is my dissertation. And that's a whole other journey. A dissertation is a 5-chapter book, essentially, that you're writing. And it is, you write the first 3 chapters are your proposal. It's about the background. Chapter 1 is. Chapter 2 is that very lengthy literature review where you position yourself as a person who has studied everything possible in the area that you're looking to contribute to, and you find a gap in that to contribute to. Chapter 3 is all about your design, how you're going to go about getting participants, how you're going to analyze the results and all of that. And then you do a proposal. So you propose to your committee, I want to do this research. They say, yes, no, maybe so. And then they let you apply for IRB, which is where I'm at. I have applied to my IRB committee. They are an institutional review board. So they're people that don't know me and I don't know them. And they'll say, yay or nay, go forward. And so that's where I'm at right now. It's over midway through. Then you conduct your study. I am choosing to do a qualitative study. I'm going to be having in-depth conversations. Nobody would be surprised by that. I love it. I've been doing it for 5 years as a podcaster. And I'm specifically interested to know about the lived experiences of school principals and if they have a spiritual practice that they feel impacts their ability to be resilient in the chaos of the work. So specifically, that's what I've been studying. I've studied all deeper about self-care, about spiritual self-care, about resilience. I kind of know everything there is to know about that. And now I'm going to put it to the test and just talk to some really incredible leaders. And then I'll write my chapters 4 and 5, and then I'll be done. So you guys, you need a community, you need a network, you need people to support you if you're going to do the journey. And, there's an EDD, which is the same. It's a doctoral degree in education. And I have a PhD, which is going to be, which is a doctorate in a more broad philosophical context. So they're the same, though. You still go through that whole dissertation process.
Wow. Kudos to you, Sarah, for going through that. And I appreciate you breaking that down for everyone. I do want to end on an actionable item like we always do on the Aspire to Lead podcast. So for those who are listening, maybe it's an aspiring leader or someone that's currently leading right now, they can do something tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey. What would you advise?
Just continue to work on raising your consciousness and your self-awareness for who you are as a leader, who you are as a person. I would say probably the most important piece of any leader is just understanding who they want to be in the role, and not, because otherwise then what we do is we become what other people want. And then there's the misalignment, and that's where burnout occurs. And it's just so critical to know who you are, to allow yourself to change, but to keep the firm foundations that you have as a person as you enter into those flawed organizations.
Been there, done that. So for those who are listening, please listen to The Wise Words by Sarah Johnson. So Sarah, will you just share with everyone just how they can connect with you? I know that, we've covered a lot for our young and current leaders. So if there's anything that they want to expand upon, or maybe they just want your services with Jim Costas and Associates, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, of course, informal conversations, open to have any conversation about bringing J. Costas and Associates in. And if you just want to talk about, higher ed or anything like that, I'd be happy to do that. And you can find me on all social media platforms at Sarah S.A. Johnson. You can email me, sarahsajohnson@gmail.com. And that's pretty easy. So yeah, there's my website right there too. And so, yeah, I'd love to help you in any way I possibly can.
So for those who are watching on YouTube, I've been popping up Sarah's website on the screen for you. Of course, if you head over to joshstamper.com, I'll have all of the links for Sarah, including a link to her book, which I had showed earlier. So I'll put it here, make sure I get it on screen here. I always have it near me. And then I also will have a link for the In Awe podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast that Sarah has been doing for quite some time. How long have you been going?
5 years as well.
5, okay.
I know.
Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So
it really does.
With that, thank you, Sarah, once again for joining me on Aspire to Lead. It's always a joy to have you partnering with me and on this podcast, and can't wait for potentially some future collaborations as we are just continuing to try and help aspiring and current leaders.
Pleasure is mine, and good luck, and congratulations on your latest project. I'm so excited for that to be out.
Just like you and your dissertation. It's coming, and slowly but surely it's coming. So yes,
it'll
excited
get there,
about that. Yes. It will get there, and we'll both be celebrating hopefully this fall.
For sure.